that you braved the cold. Look at you out there in the elements. As they say, it's a big day. It's a big day. It's a big day. I don't know how much I should even talk about it. But because sadly, the Dolphins aren't in the Super Bowl. But listen, and you have my condolences. As I told somebody, the Dolphins aren't in, but Drake May. Yeah, but he's in. And Drake May loves Jesus. And you know what that means? We love Drake May. That's how that works. I appreciate people representing. There are people represented in the first service. And that's the people of God showing up.
Yeah.
And so we need people to pray, So, and we need to rejoice with those who rejoice. So rejoice with me. Because we've had Super Bowls where the Patriots didn't win. Those are the worst. Because we did all this effort to get here. So anyway, just help me out. So let me tell you what's going on today. So you guys are so in for an amazing treat. The first service was incredible. And this is probably going back probably 9 months ago, I reached out to Tim to see if he would come out. And I was introduced to Tim and his ministry through my oldest daughter, Mia. And so she's like, hey, have you heard of this guy? Through his YouTube channel and Instagram page, Red Pen Logic. And I was like, no, wow, this is great. And so anyway, I became an avid follower of his, and which is really awesome because I told the first service that my entire Instagram feed is basically Tim's videos, some guitar stuff, and people getting arrested for routine stops. And I don't know why, I just can't stop. That is the thing I watch before I go to bed. And I don't know why it comforts me and helps me sleep well to know that it's like license and registration. No, you're going to jail. I don't know. It really comforts me. And so anyway, but we had scheduled Tim to come out this week because my plan was to be out for this week and then be back for Sunday because today is my wife and I's 29th wedding anniversary. Yeah, appreciate that. And so our plan was to be out of town, but then the thing happened, and then the other thing happened, and so this week we didn't go out of town. I spent most of this week sleeping, and so that was a different thing. And but we are still very excited. By the way, I wasn't feeling great this week, but I feel great today, and so I'm happy. Thank you, appreciate that. And I've had I've run into people everywhere from Calvary, and they're like, "Hey man, I was praying for you." I'm like, "Don't say was." I am. Let's keep that present tense. I need you to keep praying. And I had a guy tell me just after the last service, he's like, hey, man, I was praying for you. I'm like, don't stop. Don't stop, because I still need it. And so anyway, but let me tell you just a little bit about Tim before he started. But Tim does a lot of amazing things. But number one, he's a husband for the last 18 years. He's a dad of 3 amazing girls. And in 2020, he started Red Pen Logic, which is just reaching so many people, answering questions in the very confusing world in which we live. And so I just can't tell you how grateful I am for him, for his ministry. So please give a warm Calvary welcome to Tim Barnett.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, I want to start. When I got invited, you said, come in February. I'm thinking, this is going to be great because I'm Canadian, okay? And it is cold in February in Canada. In fact, I want to prove it to you. You guys, how many of you think it's cold right now here? Okay, you're gonna be counting your blessings, all right? Because at home this morning, now it says feels like minus 34, okay? Now I get it, that's Celsius, but I need to tell you that the Fahrenheit Celsius scales meet each other at negative 30, okay? So there's no difference. By the way, why don't you guys get on the metric system? That would make, with the rest of the world, by the way. You guys are holding down the fort with the old, strange. All right, so it's cold at home. This is beautiful, man. I'm ready to put on my bathing suit and head to the water, this is great. Now, I want to share a little bit more about me. I'm from Canada, born and raised. I used to be a full-time high school science and math teacher. Anyone here like science? Show of hands. Oh, nice. Good. Anyone like math? Okay, leave your hands up. Everyone say, Turn to those people, what is wrong with you? Seriously, math? Come on. No, I like science and math. That's why I became a teacher and loved doing that job. In fact, if I wasn't doing this, I'd still be doing that and would be having a great time doing it. But I actually transitioned just over 10 years ago to becoming a full-time Christian apologist. Okay, you guys know what an apologist is? So it's not someone who goes around saying, I'm so sorry I'm a Christian. Please forgive me. No, we make other people sorry we're Christians. That's what we do. We don't do that. We don't do that. No, some people do that, and they're jerks for Jesus. They shouldn't be doing it, okay? And part of the message this morning is to kind of, if that's you, hope you feel the Holy Spirit convicting you, okay? Because we don't want you to be doing that anymore. 5 years ago, actually 6 years ago now, it's like 2020, right, when the world shuts down. I'm not able to travel, speak, all the churches are closed. Like, that really changed the nature of my job. And so I'm thinking, okay, how do I do this? Well, we turned on a webcam, and we started making videos. And because I was a teacher, we get the red pen out, and we correct our students' work because we care about them. Well, what if we corrected, like I saw a tweet, and I screen grabbed it, and then I took a red pen and just kind of doodled on it, the corrections, and I reposted it. And it actually did really, really well. And I thought, maybe there's something here. And so we started red penning stuff on social media, and then it got to full-blown videos. And that's been fruitful, and as God's blessed it. So it's a lot of fun doing that. Check out Red Pen Logic if you haven't already. All right, I want you to, in that vein, I want you to imagine like you're on social media, and you're scrolling, and maybe you're on Facebook, or maybe you're on Instagram, and you see one of your friends has posted something, or maybe they shared something, and the video says something like, I can't believe those Christians. They're just a bunch of intolerant, homophobic bigots. And you're thinking, I don't agree with that. I want to say something. I want to be productive. I want to respond, but you don't know where to start. Or maybe you're at school. Some of you maybe are students, university or high school, and you're hanging out with one of your friends, and your friend comes over and says, hey, man, have you been following what's going on in the world right now? Feels like everything's a mess. I can't believe that an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God is watching over any of this. And you're thinking, gulp. I want to say something. I want to be productive. I want to respond, but I don't even know where to start. Or maybe you're at work, and you're hanging out with your colleagues, and it's lunchtime, and someone says, hey, I was watching YouTube last night and saw this really cool documentary style thing. It was all about how the Bible is full of contradictions. They're all over the place. I can't believe anyone would be dumb enough to believe that that's the inspired word of God. And you're thinking, gulp. I need to respond to this, but I don't feel comfortable. I don't know what to say. I don't feel like I know enough. Maybe I'm too shy. You have all these reasons that flood through your mind, and you just don't know how to proceed in the conversation. If you feel like, man, I've been in that situation before, you're in the right place this morning, okay? Because we're going to talk about that. I want to talk about tactics in defending the faith. Now, some people, when they're in those situations, they feel like, man, if I couldn't get to the gospel in that conversation, then what's the point anyways, right? Why bother even starting the conversation if it's not going to end with someone saying the sinner's prayer or something, And so you feel like you have to be the evangelist in every conversation. I don't think you need to be the evangelist in every conversation. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. I actually think it's really difficult in our current culture to have conversations about faith and religion. And partly that's because our culture doesn't understand what we're saying anymore. It's like we're speaking a different language. It's like we're speaking Greek or something, okay? You want to talk about the gospel with someone, and they're like, gospel, what is that? Why do I even need the gospel? Good news? Why is there good news? It's like religious ignorance that's going on. And that's not a put down. It's like we just don't talk about this stuff like we used to, okay? It's not common knowledge. Also, when we bring up the gospel, we start talking about Jesus dying for people's sins, immediately they raise all kinds of objections and challenges that are on their minds. Like you want to talk about Jesus and someone says, well, what about the Big Bang? And you're thinking, Big Bang? What are we talking about that for? I want to talk about Jesus. Or you start talking about Jesus and someone says, well, what about hell? How can you believe in a loving God that would send someone to hell? And you're thinking, why are we talking about hell? I'm talking about Jesus over here. So they start bringing up these things. I call them gospticles. Everyone say gospticle? So that's not a real word, okay? So don't look it up. And if you use it again in front of people, they might look at you weird, okay? Because it's not real, but what do you think it means? Yeah, an obstacle of the gospel, a gospel obstacle. There are these obstacles that are in people's minds. They're in the way. They keep people from hearing and responding to the gospel. And for these people, oftentimes we have to remove that obstacle that's in their way. So they're not ready to hear about Jesus yet until you answer this particular challenge. And so there's these gospels. Francis Schaeffer called this, by the way, pre-evangelism. Before you can do evangelism, you need to do some of this pre-evangelism, get the soil ready. Now, there's the religious ignorance part, but there's also the second part. And it's just our own internal personal discomfort. A lot of us, man, if we're just given a few minutes to share the gospel with someone, it's like, oh man, you got to give the elevator pitch for the gospel. He's like, I don't want to do that. I don't feel good about doing that. I just don't know where to start. It makes me feel awkward. I'm too shy, all those things. What I want to do is I want to give you a game plan that's going to help you, okay? No matter how little you think you know, how shy you are, that's what we're going to talk about. Now, I don't consider myself, I think there was gifted evangelists out there. Billy Graham, one of the best, right? I don't consider myself an evangelist in every conversation. Now, I've led people to the Lord, and praise God, it's been a beautiful opportunity to do that. But I consider myself in every conversation to be an ambassador for Christ, okay? In fact, in 2 Corinthians, it says this, therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. Now, here's my question. What does an ambassador for Christ look like? Well, sometimes it's helpful if you want to know what something looks like to look at its opposite. And if you want to see a bad ambassador for Christ, check out Nacho Libre, okay? At least in this particular situation, okay? He wants his friend to be baptized, okay, and follow Jesus. But his friend has an obstacle of the gospel, a gospticle. And it's science. Now, here's what he does in response.
I'm a little concerned right now about your salvation and stuff. How come you have not been baptized?
Because I never got around to it, okay? I don't know why you always have to be judging me. Because I only believe in science.
But tonight, we are going up against Satan's caveman. And I just thought it would be a good idea if you...
Not good. Not the right approach, right? They're going to be in a wrestling match, and so he wanted to make sure he was baptized before he got into it. Okay, that's a bad ambassador. What does a good ambassador for Christ look like? Well, at Stand to Reason, we talk about ambassadors having 3 essential skills, okay? Here are the skills. First, you have to have knowledge. You have to know some things, okay? An accurately informed mind. Now, you don't have to know everything. A lot of people think, man, if I'm going to get into these conversations and have an impact, I got to have a certain level of education, like a PhD or something, okay? Now, I'm grateful for all the PhDs out there, okay? I learn a lot from those guys and try to use their material, especially online, and present that stuff. But you can just take what you know and still be productive, okay? Of course, always increasing in our knowledge, that's important, but it's an informed mind, so we're getting our information. The second thing is wisdom. we want to be able to use that information. It's not enough just to know a bunch of stuff like an encyclopedia or something, but how do you take that information and use it in the conversation? Well, that is going to take some wisdom, okay? And so that's our method. Sometimes it involves asking good questions or using good illustrations. There's an art to it, okay? That's wisdom. And then finally, you're going to have knowledge, wisdom, and character. Now, this is the part that often gets missed in the discussion. A lot of people think of the apologist, oh, they're the really smart guy, okay? But they ought to be the kind of person who looks like Jesus, okay? So character matters. And what we're going to see is whenever the gospel writers or the apostles talked about doing evangelism, kind of tacked on there was this kind of extra command to do it with love, okay? Or to do it with gentleness and respect. All right, so that's an ambassador. Now, some people think, okay, if you're a Christian, you're an ambassador for Christ. But if you're like going to do evangelism and apologetics, well, that's going to take maybe a little bit more skill or knowledge or something. So that's where the apologists are. Okay, so you got ambassadors, but then there's this other group, this subgroup, that's the apologists, okay? Kind of like, imagine you got the police force, they can show up, when we need them, but if it's really crazy, you want to bring in the SWAT team, okay? That's actually an incorrect view of what an ambassador for Christ is. An ambassador, they just are apologists. That's what the scriptures teach. If you are a believer, if you are a Christian, if you're an ambassador, you're an apologist. Let me prove it to you. 1 Peter 3:15. This is Peter writing. The church is facing, Christians are facing intense persecution. He says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. And then here it is, but do this with gentleness and respect. So you're going to give that answer or defense, and that's where we get this word apologetics. Apologia. Okay, literally means a legal defense. It's used 8 or 9 times in the New Testament, and that's what it always means, okay? That answer or defense. Or how about this? 2 Corinthians chapter 10 says, the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. Okay, well, what are these strongholds that he's talking about? He says, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. By the way, when I do my Red Pen Logic videos, I'm not trying to destroy the individual. I'm trying to destroy their ideas, okay? And that oftentimes gets lost in our culture because we can conflate the two things. It's like, my beliefs are me, And so as soon as you attack someone's beliefs, that's taken as a personal attack or something. So we destroy arguments. How about Jude 3? It says that Paul wanted to write about all these other things. He says, beloved, although I was very eager to write to you about our common salvation, I found it necessary to write appealing to you to contend for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. Contend for the faith. So we're not just giving an answer or defense. We're not just destroying arguments. We're contending for this faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. And then consider this. Greatest commandment that Jesus lays out when he's asked about it. He says we are to love God with everything we have, and that includes our heart, our soul, and all of our mind. So what does it look like? How do we live that out? Like, what does it look like to love God with all your mind? And oftentimes when we think about love and praise for God, we think of what we just did before the sermon here where we worship God, right? But I think it's even more than that. We don't check our brains at the door when we walk in here. We don't turn them off. In fact, oftentimes, loving God with your mind involves intense thinking about Jesus, thinking about the gospel, thinking about his revelation. Here's my favorite verse, though, on apologetics, okay? This is the verse that I read before I'm going to make a video responding to someone through Red Pen Logic, okay? It says this, Colossians 4, verses 5 and 6. Walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of the time. It says, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Now, notice a few things. Walk in wisdom towards outsiders. So when you're talking to outsiders, he means like unbelievers. It says be smart. Be smart about it. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. Salt makes everything taste better, right? Think about McDonald's fries. I was at an event in Virginia a couple weeks ago, and there was a guy who was kind of driving me. He was kind of like a chauffeur, and he was working at the church, but he used to work at McDonald's. And he told me that those fries are salted when they're like made, like before they're frozen, and then they're salted again, like when they're, and he said there's 3 salting process. It's like just a crazy amount of salt. So even when you ask for no salt, you're getting salted fries, okay? But that's why we love them. That's why we're addicted to them. Because, so the point though is that should be like our words, okay? That kind of grace. And then finally, so you may know how you ought to answer each person. There's a way you ought to answer, and there's a way you ought not to answer. And this is going to be the tactical. Be smart, be kind, be gracious, and be tactical. So what does all that look like? When you take all those verses, it's like, okay, great. There's my Bible verse. Now what? How does this become practical in our lives? And here's what it looks like. It's a really modest goal. It is simply a stone in someone's shoe. If you want to do this, just put a stone in someone's shoe. Now, have you ever had a stone in your shoe before? Anyone? It's annoying, right? Have you ever had a stone in like your flip-flop and you're like trying to kick it out and somehow it stays in like miraculously? I don't know how that works. But I actually woke up, this was a few years ago, for church, got ready. You know, I had like, I was dressed up that day and had some brown leather shoes on, and I went to put them on, and I didn't notice anything right away, but I took a couple steps out the door and noticed that there was a stone in my shoe. Now, my daughter, my middle child, Jocelyn, she looks just like me, actually, just with long blonde hair. And she is like a little geologist, okay? Like she would bring rocks into our house. She'd find them, and they'd end up in our house. And this one ended up in my shoe. I could have left it in my shoe. I could have left it there. But it was annoying, okay? Like it wasn't hurting me, but it was annoying. And so I bent down, untied my shoe, dumped it out, put my shoe back on, went on with my day. What I want you guys to be thinking about is when you get into a conversation, your goal is to put a stone in someone's shoe, okay? Not literally, but like metaphorically. You want them walking away from your conversation annoyed, but in a good way, okay? Not because you're annoying, because you got them thinking. Okay, so we want to take what we know and we want to get it into conversations. How are we going to do that? Well, there's a game plan. And I didn't write the game plan, okay? I wish I had. It's actually, I'm stealing this, okay, from a guy named Greg Kokel. He wrote a book called Tactics. And I'm just telling you, you shouldn't be able to graduate high school without reading this book. In fact, in the first service, a young man came up and he said, man, this is so good. I can't wait to use it. I said, you need to go read this, like right now. Go home and read it. When I was in university studying physics, it like transformed, because I was in a secular school and I needed help. And this thing really helped, transformed how I have conversations, okay? So plug for the book. I don't get royalties for it, okay? But go check it out. Now, I used to think in every conversation, I had to be the Bible answer man. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like someone would say something that was against Christianity and I would have to like answer. So someone might say, God does not exist. And I would say, oh, yes, he does. And then I would give 5 reasons why he exists. Here's the cosmological, the teleological, the moral argument, the argument of miracle. I mean, whatever. Just here's all the arguments. Drop them on you like a ton of bricks. And I realized I was preaching sermons they didn't want to hear. And I was answering questions that, frankly, like weren't being asked, okay? He made a statement, I didn't. And yet here I am over here doing all this work. I'm doing all the heavy lifting. And he's just sitting there like, okay, Christian, answer. Like they just make the claim. Go ahead, I'm waiting. Answer me. I don't think that's the right approach we should be taking, okay? I think we need a better game plan. I think we need a different approach, a way we can go on the offensive but in an inoffensive way. And the way you're going to do that is through what the book calls the Columbo tactic, okay? You guys know about Lieutenant Columbo? I mean, if you're over 50, you know who Lieutenant Columbo is. If you're under 50, you're like, who? Right? Unless you've seen the reruns. Now, Lieutenant Columbo, he is a bumbling, seemingly inept TV detective who has remarkable success catching crooks, okay? He'd arrive at the scene of the crime. Like his hair's a mess. His trench coat looks like he slept in it. He has a cigar kind of wedged in his fingers there. He'd have a notepad, but no pen or pencil. He'd have to bum one off someone, you know. He would kind of look around at the scene of the crime. I mean, he looked harmless. He looks actually stupid when he shows up. But he's not stupid because he's got a plan. So he's at the scene of the crime, and he'd do this like trademark move with his eyebrows, kind of furrow them and say, I got a problem. There's something about this thing that bothers me. That's kind of how he talked, okay? And then he'd turn to the suspect and he'd say, you seem like a very intelligent person. Do you mind if I ask you a question? And then he'd ask his questions and maybe get a response and feel satisfied. Maybe he'd go to leave and then something would occur to him. He'd turn around and he'd say, just one more ting. And he'd like one more ting him to death with question after question after question. He'd say, I'm sorry, I keep asking so many questions. It's a habit. And this is a habit that Christians need to get into, okay? What we want to do is go on the offensive in an offensive way, but by using carefully crafted questions. Now, there's lots of reasons you should use questions, okay? There's a book called In But Not Of, and it says, man, in every conversation, ask a half a dozen questions. Well, why would you do that? Well, because they help you understand someone's view. I can't tell you how many times people come to me, hey, my friend's a Muslim. Do you recommend a book on Islam? It's like, your friend's a Muslim. Ask them about Islam, you know? So you can get to know someone's actual view. It takes the pressure off you. When you're asking questions, you're not really doing much. You're just listening, mostly. Questions keep you from distorting someone's view. It's really easy to talk past each other in a conversation when you don't understand each other. Questions help you understand and therefore not distort someone's view. They're friendly and they build relationships. I was telling the earlier service that when I met my wife in university, we met in the science library, so I was studying physics, she was studying chemistry, and there was chemistry, okay? And so she invites me, like this was in March, and then in April is her birthday, and so like a month later, I'm going to her, and I don't know anybody. We went bowling, okay, and there's a whole bunch of people there. And so I sat down next to this guy I didn't know at all, and so I just started asking questions. I was reading this book actually at the time, so asking questions. And we went home, and that guy ends up calling my now wife and says, that Tim guy is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. I'm thinking, he didn't know anything about me. We didn't talk about me at all. All we did was, I just listened to him, talk about him. And that's because when you show that you're interested, that's interesting, okay? This is just a fact of life, okay? It shows that you're interested. I was genuinely interested in him. How about questions giving education? There's so many people that have so many experiences and knowledge and whatever. We ought to ask questions and find out what they're thinking. And then, of course, they require no defense. This is one of the best parts because you're out of the hot seat and you're in the driver's seat. But the most important thing is they get you in the game. Questions get you in the game. Now, I actually want to show you a clip of, this is actually a Canadian politician, and he's being asked questions by a reporter. And he's kind of, the questions have like hidden assumptions. I just want you to watch how this Canadian politician responded to the reporter, okay? Because he is totally in the driver's seat. Like, this is just fun to watch. Okay, listen.
this topic, I mean, in terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess. I mean,
What do you mean by that?
certainly you tap very strong ideological language quite frequently.
Like what?
Left wing, this and that, right wing. I mean, it's that type of ideological spectrum.
I never really talk about left
But
or right.
anyways,
I don't really believe in that.
Okay, a lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but
Like who?
I don't know who. But
Well, you're the one who asked the question, so
yeah.
you must know somebody.
okay, I'm sure there's some out there. But anyways, the point of this question is, I mean, why should Canadians trust you with their vote, given not just the sort of ideological inclination in terms of taking the page out of Donald Trump's book, but
What are you
also
talking about? What page? What page? Can you give me the
Okay.
page? Give me the page. You keep saying
in terms of turning things quite dramatically in terms of Trudeau and the left wing and all of this. I mean, you make quite a it's quite a play that you make on it. So I'm
I'm not
just
sure.
wondering.
I don't know what your question
Okay,
is.
then forget that. Why should Canadians trust you with their vote?
Common sense.
Okay, so that, I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be political at all. That was just a guy who, he's being confronted by a reporter who, and the media in Canada especially, is very one-sided, okay? And so he knows he's going to be getting attacked here, but he's totally calm and cool and collected. Why? Because he's asking these questions. So what kind of questions? Well, let me say one more thing about questions. There's something powerful about them. Blaise Pascal, he famously said, he was a mathematician philosopher, people are generally better persuaded by the reasons which they themselves discovered, so people discover them on their own, than by those which have come into their mind by others. If I just tell you what to believe, you're less likely to accept those beliefs, okay? But if you can come to those beliefs on your own, well, that's much better. So it's true. Francis Schaeffer, he also philosopher, theologian. He's famous for being evangelistic and seeing people come to Christ through his ministry. He said, if I only had an hour with someone, I would spend the first 55 minutes asking questions and finding out what's troubling their heart and mind. And then the last 5 minutes, I will share something of the truth. That is so counterintuitive, because what we want to do is just preach at people for 55 minutes and then say, do you have any questions? Okay? And I get that. That's kind of our knee-jerk kind of response. I think we need to switch our perspective here. Oftentimes people ask me about the problem of evil. I'll do a Q&A. Someone asks about suffering and evil and whatever. I can launch into, here's my response. But the better way to respond to that question is to ask, how have you experienced suffering and evil? Because it could be that my response it's going to miss the target completely. Especially if you're suffering in that moment. Giving some academic philosophical response is going to totally miss the mark and actually come across as really uncaring, probably. So we want to find out where people are coming from. This is, by the way, Jesus' approach. When Jesus responded to people, when he interacted with people, when he had conversation with people, he asked more questions than he answered. Just go through and count in the Gospels. It's amazing how many times Jesus is asking questions. Now, is it because he didn't understand a bunch of stuff? No. Jesus was asking questions to get people to think through their worldview, to get them to think about God, to get them to think about who he was, okay? And so questions have that ability. So Lieutenant Columbo, the Columbo tactic, I want to share just two key Columbo questions that are going to change the way you have conversations. Here's the first one. The first one is, what do you mean by that? Everyone say, what do you mean by that? Now this is, let me tell you what I mean by that. This is the kind of question that's going to get you in the game when you don't know what to say, when you feel uncomfortable, when you feel like you don't have anything to say. Just ask the question, hey, I'm curious, what do you mean by that? It's an information gathering question. Gives you time to think and an understanding of what they're talking about, okay? So, for example, let's do a couple of these. if someone, like I'm in a conversation with someone and they say, evolution has proven that God is unnecessary. I know some of you are like, oh, no, it doesn't. And then you want to launch into your case. No, wait a second. Fight that urge and ask a question instead. So what could you ask? What do you mean by that, right? What do you mean by evolution? What do you mean by proven? What do you mean by unnecessary? There's a bunch of what do you mean by that kinds of questions that are going to give you more information, okay? Like the word evolution is just like accordion word, man. It can mean everything from, look, dogs have evolved, you know, like I own a Morkie Poo. That dog did not exist 200 years ago, okay? In fact, it could not exist without me constantly causing it to exist every day. If I put it outside right now, it would be just a statue, a frozen statue on my lawn, okay? 9 pounds of fluff. But evolution can also mean like millions of years of slow, gradual molecules to men kind of thing. So what do you mean by that? How about Christians are intolerant? What are you going to ask? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by Christians? What do you mean by intolerant? Turns out the word tolerance has changed its meaning. It used to mean if you were tolerant, you disagreed, but you respected the person for holding the view because they're a human being. Now it means like you accept all views. And if someone disagrees, then you call them intolerant. It's name calling. Don't force your morality on me. What could you ask? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by force your morality? It turns out when someone says don't force your morality on me, they're forcing their morality that you shouldn't force morality on you, right? That's what's happening. It's self-refuting. It's irrational to believe in the God of the Bible. What could you ask? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by the God of the Bible? It turns out, by the way, I think a lot of people, especially atheists, my go-to question with them is, what do you mean by God? Because I want to know, who is the God you don't believe in? And oftentimes the God they describe is a God I don't believe in either, okay? And so we're on the same page. It's not the correct conception of God. Things like bumper stickers, my body, my choice. I want to ask, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by choice? What do you mean by your body? I mean, these are the kinds of questions we ought to be asking to further a conversation. The Bible condones slavery. What do you mean by condones? What do you mean by slavery? These are important questions we need to be asking. Now, don't be surprised when you ask the question, what do you mean by that? And the person is just like scratching their head like they don't know what they mean by the words they say. That, by the way, is not your opportunity to like attack the person. We want to show grace. Lots of people will say things and they actually don't know what they're talking about. And that includes Christians, by the way, okay? So we want to show some love and grace there. But we also want to encourage people to think through what they're talking about and what they're saying, okay? So what do you mean by that? That question tells you what they believe. Here's the next question, and it's going to tell you why they believe it. It's going to be the reasons for what they believe. It's going to be the reasons for why they just said what they said. And that question is, how did you come to that conclusion? Everyone say, how did you come to that conclusion? All right, this is a really important question because it enforces what we call the burden of proof. If you make a claim, whoever makes the claim bears the burden of proof to defend their claim. That's how it works, okay? If a Christian makes a claim, they should be able to defend it. If I say Jesus is risen, I should be able to defend that he's risen from the dead, okay? Likewise, if someone else makes a claim, God does not exist, Christians are intolerant, evolution is proven, whatever, they should be able to defend those claims. And so by asking, how did you come to that conclusion, you're just enforcing this kind of burden of proof rule. Okay. Now, by the way, you could probably think of examples in your own life, but years ago, when I was in teachers college, I took a lot of abuse. It was usually like 30 versus 1, okay? It was a lot of non-Christians, and they were definitely not liking my Christian convictions, okay? But we were still friends, and we had these conversations. Well, one day we go to the Royal Ontario Museum together as a cohort because, they want us to bring our students there. And I'm standing next to one of my friends, and he turns to me and says, "There's no way Noah's fitting that on the ark." And I'm like, okay, what do I say? How do I respond? Of course, I'm like spinning. And I realized I didn't make a claim. I'm just standing there admiring this 90-foot dinosaur, you know? I didn't make a claim, he did. And so I asked, how did you come to that conclusion? Again, Christians, you could take the old earth approach and say dinosaurs weren't on the boat. You could say the young earth approach, he took the babies, you know, just make sure you got a pink one and a blue one and you're okay, you know, like that kind of thing. You could go that route, but what I'm saying is fight that response and ask the question instead. Where's this coming from? And so how many animals were on, I asked him, how many animals were on the boat? He didn't know. Okay, well then how big was the boat? I mean, if you're going to make a claim like there's no way you could fit X on the boat, then you must know some of these things. Of course, he didn't. And admitted as much, okay? He didn't even know that there was dimensions in Genesis for the boat. Okay, the point is, enforce that burden of proof. Because in our culture today, we don't live in a gauntlet culture. You guys know how the gauntlet works, right? The knight would throw down the gauntlet. Another person would pick it up, and then they would fight. There would be the duel. We don't live in a gauntlet culture. We live in a mic drop culture. You know how that works? You just walk up, say something, and walk away like you just won, okay? That's how it works. Wow, mic drop. And so I just make a claim, and then I get to walk away and celebrate like I did something special. No, that's not how it works. You make a claim, you better be able to defend it. And the only way people are going to start defending those claims is if we start asking the question, how did you come to that conclusion? These two questions are absolutely powerful, okay? It seems so simple, like, no duh, like of course, but we don't do it. Our response is typically to make statements. And I'll tell you what, we should make statements when it comes to the gospel and when it comes to certain truth claims. Absolutely. There's a time for that, okay? The gospel is a proposition, not a question, okay? Now, having said that, there are times when questions are more powerful. And so what I want you guys to be start thinking in those terms. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? These are powerful tools for any believer. Now, there's so much more I could talk about, but we're running out of time here. And so I want to take you, we want to, as a ministry, Stand to Reason, want to take you deeper. We're not just an informational ministry, we call ourselves an incarnational ministry. We're trying to create a certain kind of person, okay? An ambassador, knowledge, wisdom, and character, and go deeper into all those things. If that interests you, you know how these QR things work. If you pull out your phone, you scan this, and you just give us your email and stuff. We want to send you videos, articles, you name it. But I mostly want to send you my slides. So if you couldn't keep up, I know some of you are taking notes and stuff, I want to give you all those slides, and those will come to you in your inbox if you leave your email, okay? So that's the QR code. Let me finish with this, okay, in our last couple minutes. Questions are powerful. You're going to know this when you start using them, okay? If you start doing what I just told you, what do you mean by that? How'd you come to that conclusion? You're going to see, man, there's lots of people out there who don't know what they believe, and they don't know why they believe it. They're just saying stuff. And I don't want you to treat these questions like a hammer to beat people up, okay? It could be very easy. You'll see if you use them. But I would have failed big time if that was your takeaway. Like, I can't wait to get in the comments section and just, totally own my neighbor, No, I don't want you to own your neighbor. I want you to love your neighbor, okay? And the way you can do that is by gently using questions, not like a hammer, but like a flashlight. So imagine we turned off all the lights in this room, and it was pitch black, no windows. Now we got to find our way to the door. Well, we want those, the ushers who had those flashlights that were helping us, they would point us to the doorway. That's how you're using questions. I think Jesus did a great job of using questions like that to help people kind of see their way through all their confusion, all their false beliefs. We can do that. We can use those as an instrument. I want to encourage you, okay, not just to use them as a flashlight, but I want you to be practicing these questions, okay? I know this is going to seem weird, but I want you to, like, at lunch today, when someone's like, hey, should we go to Subway or should we go to McDonald's? You say, what do you mean by that? Okay? When you're watching the game tonight and, someone's like, hey, pass the wings, or, man, I hope the Patriots lose. How'd you come to that conclusion? How'd you come to that conclusion? Okay? Just start saying it. And I know this was frustrating for my wife because I started doing this. We had met in university, as I described, and every time I'd see her, like, I'd ask a lot of questions. And I'm like, but partly because I was interested, but also I told her, look, I'm trying to get better at this, and she knew that. And so it kind of got annoying. And so just husbands, just a word to the wise, if your wife says you're being an idiot, don't ask what do you mean by that, okay? Because she might actually answer you. Okay, just aside there. So start using it, because I'm telling you, 6 months down the road, you're going to be at some kind of event. Maybe it's a family function. Maybe you're hanging out with some girlfriends or guy friends that you haven't seen in a while, and something comes up, some topic comes up, and you're like, and it's like, this is my opportunity. I can say something. I want to get in this conversation. This is like muscle memory. You just got to do it. I have a friend who's cold case homicide detective, J. Warner Wallace. He told me when he was doing police academy stuff, they would practice their, like, taking their gun out. He'd, like, do it in front of the mirror. You want to do this, like, as, like, muscle memory, because you can't, like, see the bank robber and be like, okay, what side's it on here? You know what I'm saying? That's not going to work. It has to be, like, in your hand before you even knew it. And I'm telling you, if you practice these questions, you're going to be in a conversation just like that politician with the apple. And you're just going to be, like, having a good time, as you're carrying the conversation along. Not to trap, not to trick, but to guide people towards the truth. Let's pray. Father, we're so grateful for the opportunity that we get to be ambassadors for Christ. Thank you that we get to be part of building the kingdom. You could have done this all yourself if you wanted to, but you chose to involve us in the process. And so, Father, I just ask that you would give us wisdom, knowledge, character. We need all three. I pray that you would help us to recall some of these things that we've learned this morning, that we would see fruit in the conversations that we're having. That stone in the shoe, and that stone would, down the road, bear fruit that remains. And so, Father, I pray that you would give us and lead us into opportunities that would serve your kingdom and see your kingdom grow. We thank you and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for joining us today. If you made a decision to follow Jesus and begin a relationship with him, congratulations. It's the best decision you're ever going to make. Now, you may be wondering, what's my next step? Where do I go from here? Here's what I want to encourage you to do. Go ahead and click on that first link below, and we'll send you this book. It's called Begin. It's written by Pastor Bob, and it's going to help you take those first steps on your new journey of faith. So remember, to stay up to date with everything happening here at Calvary, make sure you follow @MyCalvary on Instagram and Facebook. So until next time, we love you. We're praying for you. God bless you.